That's
I know it's after 1. I'm not sure if we have a quorum yet.
We need 3 more members. We have 7 members and I'm counting. We just need 3 more.
Okay, thank you. Just saw that in the chat, sorry.
Okay.
Are we still waiting for 2 more, Nicole, or just 1 more?
We're waiting for 2 more. And I just sent out an email to everyone, letting them know that the meeting was in session. Please join. So hopefully we'll get folks
Okay.
to join here shortly.
Noe just joined, so I think 1 more now. for everybody that just joined, we're just waiting for a quorum. I think we need one more person.
Nicole, are you counting me as proxy for Lynn?
I have Nick Berger as.
Okay.
proxy. Yeah.
I don't know how long you guys want to give it. I don't know how. Some meetings I've waited 10 minutes and others we've waited 15.
Traditionally wait 15 is what my experience has been, but I'll leave that up to you.
I'm in favor of 15 for what it's worth, sending out a couple messages to persons on our group to see if perhaps I can reach them that way.
I know it's vacation season, so August is a difficult month. Here we go, Tamisha to save the day, my co-facilitator.
Here she is.
Thanks, Tamisha, for joining. We could start the meeting now. We could start the meeting now.
Sorry, I was late. I'm like nursing a injury. So when I got the text message, I hopped right on.
Thank you. All right, well, I can go through the agenda. So the first thing is welcome, introductions and announcements. And so I guess we could go around and do introductions. My name is Bisa French. I am the co-chair, I guess now, of the Racial Justice Oversight Body, along with Tamisha Walker. And I'm also the Chief of Police at the Richmond Police Department. Nicole, do you want to go down and?
Yeah, I was going to recommend we just introduce the members for sake of time, and then community members and staff can introduce themselves and chat if that's okay.
Sounds good to me.
Isa.
Good afternoon, everyone. Isa McCross, Chief Probation Officer.
Robin.
Hi, Robin Lepetsky, Public Defender.
Nick.
Yes, hi, I'm Nick Berger. I'm here for Superintendent Mackey from the County Office of Education, and I work closely with Director Bachikis, who's here today.
Dr. Walker.
Yeah, Bill Walker, Government Relations Director for the Health Department.
Tamisha Walker.
Tamisha Walker, co-founder, executive director of Safe Return Project.
Jeff.
Hi, everyone. Jeff Landau, Racial Justice Coalition Steering Committee member.
Michael.
Good afternoon, Michael Pearson. I am a private attorney with Key Counsel PC and also a member of the Criminal Conflicts Panel.
Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie Medley, Rise Center.
And Noe.
And Noe Godino, community representative.
Okay, that's all the members I have.
I think Cheryl just joined.
Cheryl, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, Cheryl, said it.
Thank you.
Welcome, Cheryl. Any announcements before we get started? All right, I don't see any. We can move to public comment. And I see there are several people that introduced themselves, community members and staff that introduced themselves in the chat. Thank you. Any public comment?
I have public comments. And I don't know if the very beginning of the meeting is the appropriate time, but I guess I'll give it now. As I put in chat, I am a community member. I've been attending these meetings maybe just under a year now, and progressively getting more up to speed with you all. And I very much appreciate the hard work and brave conversations you all have. That being said, I expressed something at one of the committee meetings recently that I wanted to reiterate, because this is the entire Racial Justice Oversight Board together for the first time, at least for me. And I wanted to add to the question that I had posed earlier at one of the committee meetings. I had just made the comment earlier on, and full transparency, I'm a community member, but my one and only mixed race son is currently being prosecuted in Contra Costa. And so I am here for very personal reasons. And I've been really mostly listening to your brave conversations and watching as you guys make progress towards this goal. But I did ask at what point we all are going to take the brave step and stop talking and move into action like the Burns Institute recommended that that we do when George Floyd was murdered. The Burns Institute said it would take some real brave action. And my question is whether or not you all as a body have decided what is that indicator going to be for you all? When are you going to say enough data analysis, enough talking, now let's take action, and these are the actions? So that was my first question. And now adding to that question, I'm just wondering whether or not you've had a chance to establish measures or to identify what measures are in place to ensure that DA Becton's espoused goals and her spirit to find racial justice in the Contra Costa criminal legal system, what is going to hold those people who do not share that spirit, who work below her, accountable for both abiding by the guidance of this board and actually putting into effect any policies that ideally soon this board will come up with to address the what I am on a very personal level seeing as extreme injustices and actions that the assistant DAs who are fighting the spirit of this board are allowed to get away with. It's jaw-dropping. And so those are my two questions. One, whether or not this body has identified a point by which we can say enough is enough. Let's take it out of the Zoom office and out into the field and make action. And two, how are we going to hold those people accountable for implementing the spirit and the policies that you all decide need to take place? Thank you.
Thank you. Generally, we don't answer any of the questions, I don't think, from the community, unless I'm wrong, somebody else could speak up. But I think it's something that we could take under consideration and discuss at a, put on a later agenda to discuss.
I would just chime in to say, I think in our agenda items that are already on our agenda, there may be the opportunity for people, if appropriate, to try to incorporate these comments in their own responses. But I agree that there wouldn't be historically a formal response now. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the next, if there's no more public comment, and I didn't see any hands raised, move on to the next agenda item, which is approval of record of actions from the May 6th meeting. The minutes were attached in the agenda, pages 4 through 7. And so if everybody's had an opportunity to look at those minutes, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
And I'd second.
Okay. Thank you. I think it was moved by Isa and seconded by Jeff. And Nicole, you'll do the roll?
Yep.
Thanks.
Isa,
Yes.
Robin,
Yes.
Isa,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
Dr. Walker,
Yes.
Misha,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Stephanie,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
and Noe.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the reports from the 3 subcommittees, starting with the Community Engagement and Funding Subcommittee. Jeff?
Thanks, Pisa. Hi, everyone again. And our Community Engagement and Funding Subcommittee report is on page 9 of the agenda packet for today. And if I just turn to that, I would know that everyone has the opportunity to read the recap and accomplishments, so I won't just recite them, but to say that I know that the data listening session is on our agenda for today, so we can discuss further there, and it's something we spent some time on in our subcommittee at the last meeting, preparing for how we would move forward today. That the having a standing item has really been a positive thing. That's the second bullet point that I have on our subcommittee report, to have the information specifically from Kiki to be able to present to us on what's happening with the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council. And then we are having that regular communication as a built-in part of the agenda, rather than remembering that, oh yeah, we have to check in about this, and sometimes it doesn't always get hit. It's something that's been really important, overlap these two committees or bodies, and to allow our subcommittee to be a point of receiving the info has been really a positive thing. The capacity fund guidelines has been, I don't think at this point, something that is further to present to the group. I didn't ultimately have attached as an exhibit because we've been in process on hammering out what will be the next pieces of that. So rather than have sort of an intermediate discussion of those guidelines, we'll just continue to make our progress in the subcommittee and present to this group, hopefully at our next quarterly, what would be our formal proposed guidelines for that project. I have a bullet point here about vetting processes. Maybe I just take a moment to discuss that and introduce it. I know that it is on our agenda later on, and that we would have a discussion about that, hopefully. I also know because we're trying to capture a lot, because there's a lot of important work to do, it is a little bit later on an agenda, and just in case we're not able to hit it entirely, I wanted to raise the point that Crawford Carpenter, who's actually on the call I see now, had come to our subcommittee meeting several months ago and had raised the issue of the situation basically coming in national media and some local different reports in media of there being law enforcement officers that were members of various sorts of hate group type of white supremacist or related, which was I think everyone who received the public comment from Crawford was feeling like, yes, this is a real thing. We don't know what exactly is the situation in our own county, but why would we be different than anywhere else? And perhaps this is something that's worthy of our consideration, discussion at the subcommittee. And I'll also say we've had limited discussion at the subcommittee, other than to say we have genuine interest in this and perhaps it makes sense to look into. And rather than have a in-depth discussion in the subcommittee and going far along without bringing to the full group, perhaps there's shared experience, knowledge here that could lead our continued work if we do continue to pursue this. So that's the reason why bringing today, even though it's not been a long-standing agenda item for us, it seemed like it would be prudent to confer with everyone at the full body so that we might best know how to move forward. And it could be that parties here had some quick responses as to, well, this is how things go for us specifically. So that said, I know it will be later on our agenda and would leave it there, at least for my part. At this time, the requested actions that I have, just skipping over the recommendations because I know we do have that the same matter, I think is really tying up loose ends. That's my perception of it, at least. And maybe just to jump to the second bullet point first, which says refer items from the last RJOB quarterly meeting to the Board of Supervisors. These were things that were already voted upon, and it is on page 5 of our agenda packet today that recaptures, or captures rather, the voting that we had at the May meeting. At our quarterly, both of these proposals were voted upon and approved. And I think it's on me to not have said, all right, how is this getting to the next step? Meaning it's got to be referred to the Board of Supervisors and or an appropriate subcommittee so that it might make its way. So for both of those, making the request, I think, which is to just say what we've already proposed, would this please be agendized at the appropriate Board of Supervisors body, if that's the full body and or subcommittee. Then the first bullet point I have is the recommendation that the task force had made for oversight. And these were the old 18 and 19 of the Racial Justice Task Force recommendations that we had made after voting and long consideration. There was a timeline that is captured in a variety of forums, so I don't want to try to delve into more detail than necessary, because I know that many people here are familiar with the history of how those recommendations specifically related to oversight of various aspects of sheriff's responsibilities, including conditions at jail, at the local jails here, that those recommendations of 18 and 19 of our initial set of recommendations to the Board of Supervisors were ultimately not approved by the Board of Supervisors at the meeting that was, I believe, July 24th, 2018. And this was saying, at that time, Board of Supervisors said these two were going to refer to the Public Protection Committee. There was further discussion there, and ultimately a vote that we had as the task force on November 14th of 2018. And at that time, I think it's also reflected in other areas, but I would just say to try to have continuity now, is that we said on November 14th, we're going to remove those 18 and 19 because we don't have the legal authority to do it. Because it seems pretty clear our hands are tied. Even though we would like to do this, we cannot do this. And there was consideration at the time, well, there's this possibility of AB 1185, which would grant the authority clearly. Some discussion from different parties, well, don't we already have it? However, that was the tenor of the conversation. And I also think it is fairly reflected, this history, in our August 29th, 2019 agenda packet, which has a history of our body. I know I'm throwing in a lot here, but I'm trying to just give a little context for how am I making this proposal right now? Or how is our subcommittee rather? And it's this long history of, we wanted to do this after much discussion. We believed that our hands were tied because of legal limitation. And now 1185 is into law. Government Code Section 25303.7 says exactly that we can, that the county has that ability. And that being the case, I would propose, and am proposing from our subcommittee, that we re-refer these recommendations to the Board of Supervisors so that they may decide how to take appropriate action, given that the legal landscape has changed and that we do have the authority to act in a way that we didn't clearly or as clearly before. And the subcommittee next steps that I've listed there are really our work to do, and it's informing everyone here so that if persons have comment on it and how we would do that, and or wanting to become more involved in our upcoming meetings, this gives a little bit of indication what we have coming up in our work. So that's everything that I had to raise, at least in my presentation of the report. And of course, I'm happy to talk further with everyone in questions.
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions of Jeff? And then I don't see that we vote on any of this stuff, but there are clearly next steps that the group is recommending. So
And right, because that's the case, and we have presented the information, at least through the agenda packet, I would wish to take a vote on the recommendations that I've made, or requested actions for each of those three.
Okay, I know it's on the agenda. I just don't know the legality of us being able to vote on it. Can some staff assist with that?
Well, I just wanted to specify on the second item for the Miles Hall and the technical assistance. That was voted on like last quarterly meeting in May, right? What I'm understanding, yeah. So our ORJ did reach out to the CAO to get further direction. Unfortunately, we haven't heard back yet. So we are following up on those specific items. I'm not sure if we need to vote on those again. But the first item was not voted on previously.
Thank you, Nicole. Right, if the actions already are being taken by CAO in terms of the previous voted upon items, I agree. I don't think there would need to be a vote here as much as just following up on that. And then as to the other, I would be requesting that we would take a vote now. And I know, Isa, you were saying, is that something that we can do? So I'll re-raise the same question. Is that something we can do? I'm making the formal proposal or request now.
I guess the question is, does it have to be noticed in the agenda that we're going to be voting on the item?
I don't believe so, because the other two that we voted on were not, the Miles Hall and the technical assistance, that was not.
Okay.
Vote item, but we decided to because it was presented in the report.
Okay, I see two hands that might be able to contribute. Cheryl's hand was first.
A couple of things. Because I was at this meeting and this isn't the first time this conversation has been raised. This conversation has been raised several times about us reconsidering these recommendations that were brought before the board before, and especially this particular issue of oversight once this was passed by the legislature. And this oversight body has been charged with considering the recommendations that are put forth by the committees. It doesn't have to have the explicit language that we're voting on, that we'll be voting, but we are considering the recommendations of the committees. That is implicit in the recommendations put forth by the committees. So I know that it can be looked at either way. It can be looked at that it has to have the explicit language that we're voting on, but it also is implicit when a committee puts forth its recommendations that this body will be voting on those recommendations. And since the recommendation has been made and the committee chair is putting forth a motion that we accept those recommendations and we vote on them, then this body and the chair, through the chair, can make the decision that we vote on those recommendations. That can be established according to the rules of order.
Great, thank you, Cheryl. Jill?
I was basically going to say the same things that Cheryl said. So putting vote or not vote on an agenda is just there to help you all know what your next action is, but this is clearly worded that it's a request to recommend to the full RGOB to act on these. So it is on the agenda as an action item as requested by your subcommittee. So I think you guys are good. If somebody wants to make a motion and then you all want to do a vote, there's nothing that would prohibit you from doing that, maybe the Better Government Ordinance or the Brown Act.
Great, think I have my answer. So is there somebody that wants to make the motion to move this forward?
I have my appreciation also, Jill. Thank you for clarifying on that. And I will make the motion then for, and I'll just use the same language for clarity. Want to make sure that in fact I do. My apologies for the delay for the moment.
To refer RJTF's recommendation for sheriff oversight to the Board of Supervisors for their consideration.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for stepping in to have that language. That is the motion I'm making.
So I will second your motion, sir.
Thank you.
I just have a point of clarification, not necessarily on the motion, but because I don't necessarily have the history from 2018 and 2019, was a presentation made to this body around what that oversight would consist of? Just so I have a little more understanding of what the actual recommendation would entail.
I have some recent, because since I was going through some of the materials and the dates, if it's all right, I could initially respond. That there had been a presentation made to our group, the Racial Justice Task Force, by, I believe it was Matt Schuler from Sheriff's Office. And it was in terms of what sort of procedures were currently in place and what sort of oversight was possible as to current practices, and that there had been that presentation in terms of what exists, and then further discussion in terms of what are the limitations of there being some form of oversight, either by an appointed investigator or inspector and or a community board, and that we received information about the limitations, but that there wasn't more in terms of what the model would actually look like, as my recollection is, than that we were wanting to embark upon the process of having oversight and having that initiated, and it was really limited to that at the time. I also have the language of those that I could maybe just share screen. Would that be useful? Or since it's a little bit longer than from my trying to read it out loud to everyone. Or even if it's not necessary, but it was an independent grievance process and an independent monitoring body, but there is more language that's there. Why don't I just go ahead and try to share screen for a second? So hopefully folks can see that there, and this is the red line. The strike through was, this had been the language and ultimately decided not to because of the then existing limitations, or at least the lack of clarity without there being 1185. Unless anyone wants me to keep that up, I could maybe just share the link in the chat and then stop my share screen.
So this is helpful. So then is the recommendation for oversight of detention operations, oversight of a grievance process, or is it a more broad recommendation for oversight?
What I'm proposing specifically is to re-present recommendations 18 and 19 as they had been. There was a process of hammering out that language and the different stakeholders weighing in. So that would be specifically what I'd be proposing to present, rather than a newer or a modified proposal that would, as then phrased.
Issa, was that helpful? 18 and 19 that are crossed out, those are the two recommendations.
Yes, thank you for clarifying.
So if you're modifying the proposal, would that come through the subcommittees or would the full body provide that language that you're voting on today that? is not?
Meaning, I meant to say, I'm not attempting to modify the proposal. It
Oh,
would be
okay.
the exact same language that it had been.
Got it, okay.
All right, and we did already have a motion and a second. Robin, I see your hand up.
Yes, so I'm wondering whether in light of the new legislation, it might make sense for us to, and maybe this is just an alternate proposal, but to recommend to the board that they not necessarily establish, because I don't think that gives enough specifics, but it's I'm not being very articulate. Somehow come up with a recommendation that they take this into consideration in light of now their legal ability to do this. And that we would recommend that there be a discussion about what, recommending some kind of body and then having a discussion about what that would look like. Christopher, I'm sorry if I made a mess on that, because I saw your head go down like, oh my God. Anyway, I don't know how to describe what I'm trying to say other than that. I think if we just make this recommendation to the board the way it's written now, it's too broad and vague.
I appreciate that, Robin. I think that's well taken. Perhaps what I could say instead to have context would be the motion for our recommending to the Board of Supervisors that they reconsider recommendations 18 and 19 in light of passage of AB 1185.
I would also, I mean, I know that we worked hard on the language of these recommendations previously, but I would be in favor of ending the recommendation. I know the language isn't up here now, Jeff, but instead of limiting it to conditions of confinement based on gender, whatever that list was, thank you, that the recommendation be simply establish an independent monitoring body to oversee, I don't know, maybe track the language of the statute, but I would end it at oversee conditions of confinement in county adult detention facilities, period.
Or maybe the remainder that says and report back to the Board of Supervisors.
Well, yes, but
Right.
Right. Jeff, do you have easy access to the statutory language?
Yes, I do. And I can actually, if I stop my screen share for a moment, I can pull up that page. I have the government code text.
I think that would be helpful.
So certainly the sub A, sub 1 right here,
Right.
we may create. And in terms of limitations, and there isn't, I think responding to the language that you were referencing, Robin, is that there isn't any sort of limitation here in terms of what categories or areas. So perhaps it would be better tracking the statute to try to take out that limiting language. It's still the same proposal that we're making in terms of there being oversight of some form, but it would just be taking out the restriction. So
right, and maybe the language should be something along the lines of creating, recommending that the board create a sheriff oversight board pursuant to section 25303.7A1 or something along those lines, so that we bring the statute right into it, which brings kind of up front and center that now they do have the authority granted to them by the legislature to do it. And we're bringing it up again because of this new authority that they have.
Yes, I think it's worth our taking the time to be thoughtful in terms of how we're presenting this, because, right, the context can get lost that this is exactly what I was saying in the subcommittee report, which won't be likely immediately in front of the supervisor. So basically saying our hands were tied and now they're not because of this section. So to modify the motion, and perhaps Robin, if you have thought in terms of the phrasing of it, I'm happy to defer, because I think it's really the concept of how we're presenting this issue so that it can move forward without there being some distraction.
Right.
What should I pull up the language that I did have?
Yes,
Do
please.
that now.
So fun to wordsmith
Mhm.
Zoom meeting.
But still worthwhile.
Yeah.
Although watching my delay here is unappealing, I know. Where? Sharing my screen with you all. All right. Refer recommendation for sheriff oversight to the Board of Supervisors for their consideration based upon passage of government code section or pursuant to government code section 25303.7.
Actually, I was gonna add that to the original recommendation.
I
That's
see.
what I was looking for.
Mhm. To the language of 18 and 19.
Yes.
Yes. Which I do have.
So why not just say, rephrase 19, refer to the board 19, rephrased to read, establish an independent monitoring body to oversee conditions. I don't even know if it's conditions of confinement we need side-by-side language of the
I know.
statute in this. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's the tech component, but we're
I want
getting
it to be as broad as possible.
yes. And this is
Okay,
a sheriff oversight board,
right.
and just that, a sheriff oversight board
Pursuant to government section.
25303.7.
Exactly.
That's pretty streamlined, right? Is that we're
Yes.
not going to have a bunch of, I mean, this I'm saying to the group, of course, that we would be saying, referring to the Board of Supervisors consideration of, or it's our recommendation that there be creation of a sheriff oversight board pursuant to this code section. And that's basically incorporating everything that happened before from 18 and 19 without having all the language included, because we can delve into the agenda packets, et cetera, if needed when we're having this discussion.
Right. I think phrasing it that way will save us from being limited by any language that we add. And it just puts it squarely back on the board to consider their authority under the new statute.
That makes sense. So I would make the modified motion.
Jeff, before you do that, I'm sorry in advance. I'm going to slightly complicate this. So I understand what I just heard as far as not wanting to limit the scope, certainly in terms of conditions of confinement, but also in terms of the way that the recommendations were worded, right, in terms of race and gender and so on and so forth. However, I might ask folks to consider giving some sort of to make some sort of recommendation for what you would like this body to look like. Otherwise, if you just say we want an oversight body, that oversight body can look like or can be comprised of people who don't represent the folks you know, who might really need a voice in this particular endeavor. So it doesn't have to be something that is limited to race, age, religion, you know, national origin in that way, but saying that you want that oversight body to be diverse in those ways, even if they're, you know, consider various points. And I know that seems like something that will go without saying, but if you don't say it, then technically folks will have complied with what you're putting together maybe and be able to circumvent sort of what you really want to provide in terms of an equitable lens and how you look at this stuff. So just pointing that out. I know it, you know, means that there's another set of revisions that have to be done, but I think it's important to make sure that's included.
So I completely understand and acknowledge and respect that, Chris, but here's what my thought is on that. This will be a huge deal. If the Board of Supervisors takes this up, they're going to do it with public comment and with input, and they're not just going to adopt or not adopt whatever we come up with here, and we're certainly not going to be able to come up here with a I don't think anyway, with the parameters of what we would want this body to look like. I don't think we have the information or the knowledge. Yeah, that would take a lot of research and work. And I think that would be work that would be undertaken by the Board of Supervisors if they were to agree to move forward with this resolution or this recommendation. So I would be hesitant to come up with additional language along those lines now, because I think that will all be part of the process in the future. I'm going to ask Jill if she has any thoughts on the process for this piece of it, but that's my initial thought.
But before she speaks, because I have my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep.
Yeah, and so I'm going to agree with Christopher because I was just about to say that before he says something, and because I totally disagree. That's how we have this body now. This is how we ended up with the Racial Justice Task Force. This is a racial justice body. And I'm not about to give this over to the Board of Supervisors to stack it with people who are going to do something that's antithetical to what we are trying to achieve. And I know that people can have their own opinions on this, but I have sat through too many Board of Supervisor meetings where they are singing the praises of the sheriff. So no, ma'am, I am not about to sit here and trust that they're going to say, you know, these are great ideas, so let us choose who gets to have oversight over the sheriff. No, ma'am, no. We made the recommendation. And if the recommendation is that in concert with this body and the public, then that is the recommendation. No one is saying that today in this meeting that we have to come up with those parameters, but the voice of the people and the voice of this oversight body must come up with the parameters for how that oversight body is formed. But I am not about to say that Board of Supervisors are the ones who come up with those parameters of how the sheriff is going to be how the sheriff department is over going to be, how the oversight body for the sheriff is going to be handled. No, not on my watch, because they have shown time and time again that they are not willing to make that kind of decision. Not wholesale anyway, one or two of them maybe, but not wholesale. On the other side of this is the way that we have just recrafted this. We have taken out all the parameters that we have been charged with. I get it that we want to be these have it broad, but Ms. Robin, that broad is not the reason that we are here. It is Black people who have been misused in this system. It is brown people who have been misused in this system. It is Muslims who have been misused in this system. It is women who have been misused in this system. It is young people who have been misused in this system. And so it is transgender people who have been misused in this system. So I disagree that we need to make it so broad that this oversight body does not have a charge. We need a charge as to what we're asking these board of supervisors to do. So yes, we want it broad, but we don't want it so broad that we are giving no direction as to the latitude of what we are asking the board oversight body to do. The people who have been most harmed, the people who have been most impacted by the system, this criminal legal system, are the people these oversight body are meant to protect. And so the recommendation, as it were, when the task force was formed, and when the task force came and was very careful with how they worded these two recommendations, we have to go back to that. And we can't be afraid, we cannot be afraid to ask for what the people ask for. And those two recommendations came from lots of talks with the public. It wasn't just us sitting around coming up with it. Those came from I forgot what we called those public listening sessions back then, but it was in every bit of the county that the public said they wanted this. We just didn't have the legal legal force behind us. And now that the law is there, we need to go back and ask for what the people have been asking for. And so I think that it's good to try and stay broad, but not so broad that we take away what it is that we really need. We really need for our communities, especially the Black, Latino, Indigenous, and the other marginalized communities that have been harmed by the actions of this criminal legal system. Thank you so much.
So this is Jill Roy with Supervisor Anderson's office. Given all that Cheryl just shared, I have a couple of suggestions. Since there is the voiced concern about what it would look like, you could make this request to the Board of Supervisors for approval to develop that and ask them to refer it back to the RJOB to develop what that would look like and make a fuller recommendation after you have some time. That would be one recommendation. The other would be to work in a subcommittee of this RJOB to develop what it is that you think would benefit, would be a result of the community feedback and what you feel would be the most beneficial for our county, and then make that recommendation to the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you, Jill. And Robin has her hand up.
So thank you, Cheryl, as always, for your wisdom. I think we have the same goals, and I think I'm just trying to shortcut some of the roadblocks I was afraid we would see. But I think with Jill's suggestion, I think that's brilliant that we actually ask for the control over the parameters to be kept with the RJOB to come forward to the board after we've been able to have a further discussion and a more cogently drafted, perhaps, set of recommendations for what that oversight body would look like. So I completely agree with you, Cheryl, and I thank you for that wonderful clarity. And I just want us to do this in a way that will be the most impactful and So that's where I land on it. So thanks.
Thank you. And Michael had his hand up. Oh, you put it down. All right. He no longer has his hand up. So with everything that was just said and the recommendations by Jill, we have a new motion to move this forward with new language.
I'm going to give it a shot now and say that we recommend to the Board of Supervisors that they establish a sheriff oversight board. Or instead, I'm going to say create a sheriff oversight board. That's the words in this section. So we were recommending to the Board of Supervisors that they create a sheriff oversight board pursuant to Government Code Section 25303.7 and refer back to the Racial Justice Oversight Body for appropriate action. Maybe not that last part. I'm seeing some looks on, okay, well, not appropriate action. I entertain amendments to the last part. I see Robin's hand up.
How about for recommendations regarding the makeup of the civilian oversight body?
Composition.
Yep, thank you.
I'll accept that modification. So I would then say that we are recommending to the Board of Supervisors that they create a sheriff oversight board pursuant to Government Code Section 25303.7 and refer back to the Racial Justice Oversight Body for
recommendations as to the composition of the body. How's that sound?
exactly.
Should it be the composition and the charge?
Yeah, thank you. I was just gonna say that.
Good.
Thank you so
Good.
much.
That was in, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know who
Director.
said that.
I
but
was
yes.
just gonna say that, the charge and composition of the body. Thank you,
Yes.
Director.
That incorporates it better.
Yes.
It's for our recommendations. I can do it. And now remember the recommendations is the last part. One more time. Everyone together? Okay. We are recommending to the Board of Supervisors that they create a sheriff oversight board pursuant to Government Code Section 25303.7 and refer back to the Racial Justice Oversight Body for recommendations regarding its composition and charge. Excellent. That's the
I'm
motion.
being picky,
That's the
but I think you
motion.
flip
You need
it.
to
I think it's the charge and composition, but I'm being picky, but
They're
just
both
grammatically,
important, but
just grammatically, you just, yeah. But yes,
Is there a second?
second.
Thank you.
I see a hand by Michael Pearson.
All right, Michael, you want to ask your question before we do the roll call vote?
Yeah, I just had a kind of a point of clarity on this entire issue. Just kind of going back to the whole purpose of the Racial Justice Task Force and Racial Justice Oversight Body. We are already an extension of the Board of Supervisors, and we are already, it seems like we're tasked and have the authority to do this already, because there's three things that we have to do that's in our mandate. Research and identify consensus within the county to reduce racial disparities in the criminal justice system. That's where C, implementation of. To me, we have our charge already. And then the third part is to report back to the Board of Supervisors, the progress we made towards them. And the other organizations that I'm part of on board subcommittees, we're assigned a task to take care of, and we go and when we're charged with certain things, if we're given the authority to do things, we perform and then we report back. If it's something that requires approval by the general board, you know, that's typically in our mandate. I don't see that in our mandate, so I'm just wondering if we're doing an extra step in this by and I know maybe a controversial thing, committing this, you know, creating this oversight thing for the sheriff's department, but it's directly in line with our mission and within our authority. And I may be wrong on our powers as this actual oversight body. And if I can get clarity on that.
Thanks, Michael. I know that I could respond, and I see Robin has her hand raised also. So basically, I would just say in terms of the motion that I'm making, and Michael, I agree with you that this is part of our mandate, and it's entirely appropriate for us to be raising this to the Board of Supervisors. And to your point, could we do it on our own? I would say no, because what we're talking about is creating a whole new body, basically, to take that type of formal action, which is going to mean something like this. It'll be different, but there'll have to be agendas and notice and selection of the different parties. So we can be on firm ground in saying we recommend this to the supervisors, and that they wouldn't say, you know, who are you to be weighing in on this? And also, I think it is beyond our power and authority to actually create the oversight or an oversight body without there being approval and formal vote from the Board of Supes.
Thank you, Jeff. Robin?
Yes, thank you. Just to add to, I agree with what Jeff said, and to add to that, I would also say that we have an extra wrinkle here in that we did bring this recommendation to the board initially, and it was rejected by the board. It was voted down. And so we are now using the opportunity of this new legislation to raise it again. I also think it provides an opportunity for the broader community to weigh in on this issue if it is on a board agenda, and we can rally support, because I know there's broad support in the community for this to happen, to have public comment at whatever board meeting this ends up on the agenda for, so that we can add voices beyond the scope of just this committee. So for that reason also, I think it's strategic to bring it before the board again.
Michael?
And I understand all that. I understand the politics of this. This is political now. So it's politics, and it's doing things the politically correct way. But I would also say that as a body, we should seek clarity on our actual authority and our powers, because if we are just to be the eyes and ears and report back and not be the arms and legs that actually do work, we need to, you know, I like to understand that. I like to understand the extent of our actual power or authority, because as I read through I didn't find any clarity in our bylaws. Only thing I found was on our initial mandate, what we're allowed to do. And, you know, according to that, we have the authority to do this type of action, because it's going to be punted back to us anyway to kind of keep track of these organizations. I mean, as my understanding of what we are, we're supposed to track the government entities here in the county, and we're supposed to see where the disparities are, and we're supposed to report back. And it kind of seems like it's already in that, but I would like clarity, or maybe this is for a later agenda item, about our actual, like how much ability, what is the extent of our authority? What can we actually do besides just kind of take reports and take information down and make just general recommendations?
Thank you. Robin? You're on mute.
That's appropriate, because what I was saying is that I feel like I'm talking too much, and I'm going to step back and give someone else an opportunity if they want to respond to Michael.
I've been talking a lot too, but because I had made the motion, unless there's another hand at the moment, I would say, Michael, I think it would be appropriate to return to the question at either an agenda item later here or in a future quarterly in terms of what is exactly the power that we do have. And also to take the action today of recommendation at the very least, it does move the ball forward. And I think at least it's still my opinion, and we can get the clarification moving forward that that is as much as we have the power to do, that we're taking the most action that in fact our authority allows us. And Emilio, I just wanted to respond about why didn't it happen before you had in the chat. I think it's because they had believed we didn't have the authority. We didn't have the legal authority, and now we do. So that's, I think, why we're on solid ground also to make the recommendation.
Thank you.
Robin, is your hand still up, or?
I just wanted to add, just to Michael's point about we're doing what's politically correct. My proposal is not based on what's correct. It's based on a strategic thought about what will get us closer to our goals. And it's not, certainly not out of wanting to placate anyone or anything along those lines. Just to clarify that.
Michael.
Okay, and just to kind of explain, I understand, but as an African-American person who has experienced a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, or that this committee has been set up to address, it's very disheartening when we keep talking about it and we say we're going to send this here, we're going to send it there, there's very little action that's taking place. And I'm not trying to disrespect any work that anyone's done or anything, but when you don't see direct results and when you don't see direct actions or mandates or policies changes, it gets very frustrating. It gets very it's very disheartening as a representative, as a person of color. So it's very disheartening to me when we're talking, and then we gotta, when it comes to an issue of race and disparities and things like that, we can make decisions about everything else, but when it comes to that, we want to drag our feet, or we want to take extra steps, be extra cautious when we're making these type of policies. So it's just a little frustrating. And anyways, that's kind of my point. That's it. And I'll stop talking.
Thanks. Rebecca?
I was just wondering if there was a way to perhaps reformulate the beginning of the recommendation to be stronger than to recommend. So I can't remember exactly what the language was, but just listening to what was just shared, instead of saying recommend that they take up the consideration of that, is there a way to say that we are asking them to do it? Jeff, what was the beginning of the sentence?
Sure, it was recommend. And I think that is in the form of, this is kind of like term of art, I think, just kind of how it's usually presented, and we make the request by making the recommendation.
I know what you mean, but I'm just wondering if there's a way that we could, I mean, that sounds very, just thinking about what Michael was just sharing, that's like, hey, maybe you might know, like, it's time. So how do we make that in a way that sounds appropriate for the parlance of the group, but also is stronger? And then also I'm sorry, I just wanted to also point out that Emmylou asked a question in the chat, which I think is a good one, which is, do we know why the board rejected that? Did they feel like, and maybe it's useful to proactively address their concerns? Just thinking about, was it because they didn't feel like it was in the scope of their purview before until this, is that the issue, that why?
Yes. So just responding to that, that it had to do with the lack of authority that they believed we had. And now that we have this new statute, we do have the power. And there are many hands. And Michael, I just want to say, status quo is not okay, right? That's not at all. It bears saying explicitly that it's unacceptable, the state of affairs and across the country, in our community, the reality of racial injustice that's going on constantly, and that cannot be satisfied with slow measures or anything that prevents our progress. And I do, for what it's worth, genuinely believe that this is the max that we can do, and that perhaps we will in other ways try to continue pushing. But I think in terms of what's the power of this body, this is the most that we're authorized. But I'll stop my comment.
How about if we were to say something like to alert the Board of Supervisors? That's a very charged word, but I'm going to throw it out there.
Yeah, Denise just said urge, and that's what I was thinking also. We urge the Board of Supervisors to create, right? That's not demanding, because it's not in our power to demand, but it is urgent. And that's kind of, that much I think is reasonable to add.
We have a couple more hands up. We have Tamisha, who is also the co-chair, and I'm going to ask you to take it over for the next 5 minutes while I step away for a second.
Yes. Thank you, Chief French. I want to highlight, as a member of not just this body, but the previous task force, as well as the racial Contra Costa Racial Justice Coalition, who fought really hard to have both bodies established with clear mention and intention about the composition, is why I myself, as a formerly incarcerated person of color, Black, Latina, sits on this body to make sure that the conversations are intentional. Our charge has always been to make recommendations that are enforceable by the county, that could potentially be enforceable by the county to curb racial disparity in the system. We're not going to ever legislate our way out of white supremacy, patriarchy, right? Like that's not going to happen, but we can do the best we can in this space. I would suggest that folks who don't know the history of the work potentially get with the Contra Costa Racial Justice Coalition, who can provide proof that over maybe the last 4 to 5 years, that this work of racial equity in Contra Costa County has yielded some results. It's not going to be what we want overnight, because we're battling a system that is historically led, and now the community has decided to step up. I think this body has made recommendations that have moved some things forward at the county level, and it's never going to be perfect or where we would actually like it to be, as for some of us as abolitionists, but we can at least get the system to do the least harm that it's done historically. Maybe we can have the discussion about the charge, change the charge. I think the least we could do is urge this board to establish, create, or whatever, this sheriff oversight body, which was fought for by the community. It didn't work at the county level, and so people decided to take it to the state level, and this is where we are. All we can do is make the recommendation. It is on the community then to step up. And so this would give the community the power that they need to continue to move forward with the work that they would like to do. And so I'm hoping that we can get to a vote today to move this forward to the Board of Supervisors, so that we, as community organizers and community members who have been trying to fight to create this body for a long time, can take it over from there and make sure that we're re-engaged and that some accountability is measured in this system continually. The district attorney meets with the community and has been doing a lot of great work around that system. It's time that the sheriff department have to do the same. And I will
let go in my comments from there. And I see that Cheryl has her hand up.
What she said.
Was that it, Cheryl?
I said what she said. Look,
Um,
I just want Michael to know, Michael, we've been working on this for a long time. I feel you, I understand, I hear you. I hear your frustration, and it mirrors the frustration that many of us have in this movement. A lot of us have gone through these and gone through this movement. These are not new, but this is the work, and this is the work that many of us put in. And this work is it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of steady progress. It took us a long time to get here. It took us, centuries to get here. And it's not going to take a couple of years to get out of it. As Mr. Misha just said, right? And we can mandate, you said it beautifully, we can mandate or regulate our way out of it. But at the same time, it takes strong voices like the people here to keep focus on the impacted people, where initially, our first thing is let's take the win. Let's take whatever we can get easily. And we got to remember that easy is not the way that is going to get us to where we have to go. It's a fight. And that fight, I'm always reminded that liberation does not come without a fight. And your oppressor is not going to just give something to you. Some people are in the business of, you have a jail, they're gonna feel it. They're what they do, right? There's an old saying that says the spider and the fly cannot make a deal. The snake and the rat cannot make a deal. They can't make a deal. You're not gonna find the spider and the fly just gonna sit around and say, you know what, man, if you take care of that corner and I stay in this corner, we're gonna make a deal. I'm gonna let you live, and the snake and that rat can't make a deal because that snake needs that rat to live. We gotta find a way in our communities to go after what we need for liberation and to stop oppression. But that means that we have to do that. You can't depend on somebody else to give you liberation and to live oppression. And frustration be what it is. Frustration be what it is. In these spaces right here, we have to do the work. And as Tamisha said, Racial Justice Coalition, Racial Justice Task Force, and now the Racial Justice Oversight Body trying to get its share of oversight body. We have a DA accountability roundtable. We have sheriff accountability, both here in Contra Costa and in Alameda County. We were on an Alameda County Sheriff Oversight Body meeting last night. We don't just do it here in Contra Costa. I mean, several of us on this call right now were in Alameda County talking the same thing. And tomorrow night, we'll be talking about this on the state level. This is work. So sometimes I know you're frustrated. I got two sons right here. One just walked in here and asked me what we were talking about. They heard you speaking. That's why you're here. When I heard you speaking to the supervisors about why you wanted to be on this body, the same passion that you had to get on this body, we need you to channel that into how we're going to solve this problem. So, sir, understand, we know and we feel it every day, but it is not something that's a quick fix. We didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. So we need you here with us. Thank you.
Michael, hand is up.
Okay, just to clarify, my first hat I wore as an attorney. I and this is based on me being on the governance committees of other bodies and other boards and things. I read through what authority we have, and my question was a question of clarity of, it seems like we were already given the authority to do this. is what I was trying to get clarity on. The second part of that was a little more, emotional charge, whatever. But my clarity is the board's authority. That I believe under what's posted on our website and going through the bylaws and materials for this body, we are an extension of the Board of Supervisors, and we have the authority to do this. So that was my question. And everybody that's worked on this, I commend Jeff and the team and everyone that's worked on this. It's great work, and by no means is it a criticism of it. My question really was more on, I think we have the authority to do this by how this board was already created. And maybe I'm just reading it legally. It looks like we have the authority, but that's why I think I was asking for clarity on that.
Any other comments? We can definitely figure out a way to get clarity on whether we had the same or equal authority as the Board of Supervisors to establish such a body. I'm not sure that we do. But right now there's a motion and a second on the floor, unless, I guess, point of order for me is, do we take that vote, or is there an option to give Jeff the option to retract his motion and amend the motion to say urge rather than recommend? And maybe somebody could help with that if they're on here.
To follow up on what you were saying, Tamisha, that is what I want to do, is change the urge language. So if I can.
Yeah, we just need to get it on record that you are withdrawing your previous motion and doing a substitute motion with this new language, and then reread it and then capture another second and roll call vote.
I agree that I'll do that procedure. I'll withdraw the prior motion, and I have major assist here from Nicole, who texted me the language. Okay, so I'm making the motion now. The Racial Justice Oversight Body urges the Board of Supervisors to create a Sheriff Oversight Board pursuant to Government Code Section 25303.7 and refer back to the Racial Justice Oversight Body for recommendations regarding its charge and composition.
I second that.
So we have a motion by Jeff and a second by Michael. Roll call vote, please.
Lisa?
I'm gonna abstain.
Robin?
Yes.
Diana? Diana Beckton? You're still here? Lisa?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Dr. Walker?
Yes.
Tamisha?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Stephanie?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Ronell?
Yes.
Cheryl?
Absolutely.
And do we see if Diana Beckton's still here?
It doesn't look like she is.
Okay. Well, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, everyone. I do have the agenda up. Is that presentation was from the Community Engagement and Funding Subcommittee, correct?
Yes.
And point of order, do we take public comment at the end of each? Do we take public comment now, or just move into the next subcommittee report out?
We would typically take public comment before we vote on it, but I think that we had provided the opportunity and no comment was made.
Okay, great. Next presentation is data subcommittee.
Okay, that's me. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Becky Bachikis. I'm the Director of Student Programs for the Court and Community Schools at the County Office of Education and the Chair of the Data Subcommittee. And our report begins on page 10 of the agenda packet. And the first page really is just capturing, the summarized notes of what we've done in the last 3 meetings that we've had. And just, you guys can all read what's there. So I'll just point out 2 highlights. One is that we have had some increased collaboration with the JJCC as well. I know that that was noted in the CEF subcommittee as well. And we also have been doing that. I think it's been very fruitful because there is a lot of crossover in some of the work that we're doing in terms of being prevention minded and finding out how we can share information. So we have definitely appreciated having that crossover between the 2 data subcommittees. We also have been receiving more data from the Sheriff's Department in regards to their booking log or contemporaneous arrest log that they've posted, and Assistant Sheriff Calhoun really worked to kind of work on the timing of how that is released there and then bringing that information to us. And so that was a new thing that we started looking at over the last quarter. And then really, I think, turning to the second page of our report out on page 11, we definitely would like to, as last time when we met last quarter, we asked for the body to extend our commendation to the probation department for their transparency and data sharing. And at our last subcommittee meeting, we discussed our desire for the body to recognize the sheriff's office for their engagement and transparency. So that's one of the things that's there on the second page that we're asking for that to be considered. And then really the 2 things that are make up the remainder of our agenda after the other subcommittee report are what we would like to check in about. So we would like to clarify, and we asked this last time, but I think we didn't quite get the answer, what website we should be posting data on. We have some data that we are ready to post, and it is the same data that we are proposing be shared at the community listening session. And so it's further in this packet as part of the attachment. But we are still not clear where the website that things should be posted on for the subcommittee is. What is the actual location, and how do we go about posting that data? So we would like some direction about that. And then the second thing is, we have been able to secure a place on the agenda of the mayor's conference for the November meeting. And we would like to get confirmation from our chairs, from Chief French and Councilperson Walker, about their ability to present at that mayor's conference on November 6th. And we've included a draft presentation here, and the subcommittee just wants to make sure that we're not trying to at all dictate what our chairs present at that body, but just wanting to have a starting place. And that, of course, we would be open to any sort of, you're free to modify it as you see fit to bring to the group. But we just wanted to confirm that the 2 of you are actually able to attend. And our understanding is that it's going to be taking place in person at this point. At 6:30 p.m. in Clayton. And so those are kind of where we're at. The next steps we have, we had a very large conversation about data sufficiency and what data we have and what we are still hoping to get. And there are kind of 2 things that we feel that we still need in terms of large pieces of data. And one of them is to request from all of the different police departments the contemporaneous arrest data, which could be similar in its format and structure to what we have included as an example that the Sheriff's Department is is now releasing to us and giving to us. And so that just to make sure that we have a clear ask of what we are asking at the mayor's conference. And so just to get confirmation from the larger body that that the body is comfortable with the ask of that contemporaneous arrest record from the police departments. And then also we had a very large conversation about requesting some data from the district attorney's office, because we have data about bookings, we have data about contacts, and we have data about outcomes, but we don't have that data in the linked way, which allows us to be able to identify the level of disparity that's happening when in filing decisions, and also dispositional outcomes as it's connected to racial and ethnic demographic information. And so at our last meeting, we did make the decision as a subcommittee that we would like to request from the district attorney's office that linked data about filing decisions, dispositional outcomes, and race and ethnicity. And then finally, we want to just circle up with the whole body. And there are certain members of our subcommittee who are also on the community engagement subcommittee. And so that's been helpful, but just make sure that we have a clear plan about what's going to happen with the community listening sessions. And I know that that's agendized later. So for now, I guess the main points are just to clarify about the mayor's conference, both the who's going to be presenting, and then also, that's the main thing, I guess, for that. And then the website where we should be posting, and the ask for the mayor's conference about the contemporaneous arrest log, and the request from the DAs if there's any discussion about that. So sorry, that's kind of a lot of things.
I can start. So I am available on the November 6th date. That's a Saturday, is that correct?
No, so it should be November 4th.
Sorry, November 4th. So sorry. Helps if I say the right date.
Okay.
Are you available then, Chief French? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent.
Tamisha, are you available?
What time that day? Because I also see, unless I was wrong, that we have this meeting that day.
Yes.
It's 6:30 in the evening in Clayton.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can make that work.
Excellent.
Tamisha, you and I can talk before then to coordinate our presentation.
Yes, 'cause I also need to, I'll probably be missing my reimagining public safety meeting. So I think it will be good to be prepared to drive all the way to Clayton, wherever that is.
Between Richmond
Base
and
of Mount Diablo.
Yes.
And maybe in preparation for that, we should make sure that you guys have a Word version or a PowerPoint version that can be modified of the presentation. So that came from Patrice and her office.
that would be great. And I did look over the presentation, so I thank you to whoever put that together.
That was Patrice.
I'll be happy to send you that. I'll send it to both of you so that you can have copies of it and work from there.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
And then
Thank you guys both so much. I think that would be really excellent to have you be our representatives there.
Thanks. So in regards to the request for contemporaneous arrest data from local police departments, I thought when the presentation was made to the Police Chiefs Association that the Sheriff's Department had stepped up to say that they would be able to provide all of the arrest data for all of the departments in the county. So now I'm a little bit confused about going back to each individual department.
So what they post on their website is only the bookings that are made from the arrests that originate from the Sheriff's Department, is my understanding.
Okay. Maybe it was in our conversation after the presentation was made that the sheriff, that we discussed, the sheriff just providing all the information so that's consistent for all of the areas of the county. So that's something that I can follow up with the association.
That's my understanding too. And in fact, when we discussed in our data subcommittee meeting, sharing the sheriff's office booking log, it came back to us that the expectation would be that other local law enforcement agencies that don't have relationships or contracts with the sheriff will then ask the sheriff to do that. So apparently they don't yet feel that they have authorization or approval to send that to us. Is that your recollection, Becky?
I think that I might not understand all the intricacies of this language because it's not my day job. But I think that there was some question about whether, yeah, so maybe if all the different agencies could give permission to the sheriff's department, because all those people are coming through the door, right? So that there is definitely that. But and the other thing that was brought up is that many agencies do post some kind of contemporaneous arrest log on their website, but there isn't like consistency in what's posted. And several agencies do not post their racial and ethnic data, even if they do post their contemporaneous arrest log online. And so that would be, I guess, maybe a question about including that field in the way in which it is reported.
So the information that the sheriff is currently reporting, is that the information that's being asked for across the board?
Right, that was kind of, we wanted to provide a template so that it was clear what we were asking. And so we had a robust discussion about the sufficiency of that. And it was determined that that could be a template for what we are asking from each LEA.
And Chief French, that could be found on page 27 of the packet, is an example from the sheriff's office.
Got it, thank you. So that may or may not need to be a request. Hopefully I could get that clarified before the mayor's meeting.
I think that however, you know, if the sheriff's department has the capacity to do that and they're willing to do it, and it's a matter of getting the LEAs to give permission, that would work fine for our purposes. And if they don't feel comfortable doing that, or they would rather post it themselves, then that's also an option. I don't think the intricacies of how it gets done, there's certainly flexibility in that. It's just somehow getting the information to Denise so she can do her analysis with her team.
You know that the chiefs were on board when we talked about it. So I think that that's not a hump that we need to get over. It's just how to make it happen.
Great. Did anyone have anything to add about our request to the DA's office about the filing decisions and dispositional outcomes?
I would just point out that we have a question in chat from Lou. Sorry for the siren background. Does this body know when it will be provided the Vera Institute's report and analysis, right? Because we knew that was something that was coming when we first sort of raised this, I think directly with the DA. We heard about this report that was coming out of the Vera Institute that was supposed to provide at least some level of analysis, while the DA's office didn't seem to have the capacity to provide exactly what we were looking for. And if I'm not mistaken, Shayla at an earlier meeting seemed to have gotten the feedback that it was shortly going to be available to us. So it was something that we could at least take a look at. And then feedback seemed to contradict that, and maybe that it was going to take a little bit longer. So I'm wondering, along with Emilu, who raised this in the chat, if there is any feedback in terms of that Vera Institute report, or when we should expect it.
I think that probably,
anyone from the DA's office?
I don't see anybody else from the DA's office. That's probably a question.
And I did see the question in the chat, but because we hadn't got to public comment, it's just always a question of the point of order for me. So I saw the question in the chat. It wasn't an oversight. I just didn't think we got there yet. But thank you for raising that up.
Thanks. Yeah, I put it there. I just didn't want to overstep boundaries, but it just feels like we don't want to reinvent the wheel if that report is coming out. And I've reached out to the Beer Institute myself and was told a date, but that date has passed. And so I was just wondering whether or not this official body has a correct date, because it seems like that's valuable information that we could use instead of trying to find the same information in some other.
I think that what we're trying to ask for here is not something summative, but rather something ongoing. So we, just like we're receiving quarterly information from probation and from other agencies, we would like to receive this on an ongoing basis for the point of being able to determine the amount of disparity. I'm not even gonna say if there is a disparity, because we know there is, the amount of disparity that exists at this particular decision point. And so that very well might provide us some context and some very good data, but I don't think it would take the place of what we're asking, which is for the DA to partner with us in giving an ongoing report so that we can monitor this decision point.
Got it. Yeah, I was just thinking it might provide a baseline, but yep, ongoing data. Good.
All right, any other questions, comments about the report from the data subcommittee?
Oh, I should have done it in reactions. May I? Virtually raising my hand here, just to say that I know our community engagement funding group is incorporating information that we receive from a variety of sources, but also at our meetings. So it's kind of speaking to community to the extent that we're representing in that subcommittee, and also Racial Justice Coalition supporting the request that the data subcommittee is making for this information, and also in particular from the district attorney's office. So that's reflected in a response from data subcommittee that's also urged by myself, and I think it's reflective of the tone that we've heard at our subcommittee meetings.
Thank you, Jeff.
We open it up for public comment just to make sure we got everybody. I do not see.
Are we talking about where we would post the data in the agenda item on the listening session? Is that where that's going to be talked about, or is that still hasn't been decided on?
Is there clarification on that?
I heard Becky ask it, but I didn't see any feedback on that.
I did a bad teaching technique. I asked too many questions at one time. So
it's on the agenda. Believe it's next up on the agenda. Okay. Is that correct?
No, I think it was a little bit different. So. I thought it was the clarification on where, what website to post it on. Is that that was the question, correct?
Yeah,
that's correct. And we can post it on the Our Jobs general website with, just general knowledge or general, preliminary analyses coming from our county. The reports are in the packet, and the charts are, and they all the data comes from the State Department of Justice. So we could have a link to it that way, but I don't think we wanted to make assumptions, and that we would really like to get feedback from this body on the best location for that information. I think Nicole did post the link for the Racial Justice Oversight Body website in the chat. So if anybody has an opportunity to take a quick look at it, that would give us some feedback or input if it's an appropriate place.
I think we could put a tab on the left hand, the bar down the left hand column, we could do a tab for data. So it's easy for people to find. It's in one centralized location. That would make sense to me anyway.
In the dark blue rectangle there?
Yeah.
Works for me.
Okay. Thank you.
So was there any, I'm sorry, I'm trying not to step on your toes, facilitators here, but was there any other comments about the request to the DA? I just want to make sure that we're capturing, our subcommittee felt that was the right inflection point to ask for, but I just want to know if anybody had any feedback about that.
I think Cheryl has her hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't want to just yell it out. I think it's less about having it on the, I think the website's important to have it on the oversight body website. I think the biggest complaint that we've seen from the coalition is that it's hard to get to the oversight body website, right? It's buried in Contra Costa County's mire of I gotta press too many buttons to get to it. So somehow the county itself is causing the problem. It's just not accessible from the county's perspective. So we gotta find a way to make it more accessible to people, so people know how to even get to the RSHOP site to even get to the data. So that is the issue. He's not just, if you can get to the oversight body website, bonus, kudos to you. Let's clap some hands and let off some fireworks, because then you can find the data. So that's great. But even getting there has been the problem. And that's been the complaint about, how do I even find out about you guys' meetings? It's just not user friendly. The county site is just not user friendly. So people can't even find out about these meetings. It's like it's hidden. So I think that is where I would like to see some progress. So somewhere we've got to find out how we can get these data to people through, in a better way. So I would like to see these more prominent on the county site. Point it out somewhere else. They can figure it out. I don't work for the county. I pay them. They can figure it out.
I would just add really quickly, and I know a lot of you probably heard me say this before, and I get that part of what we're wanting to do is put the data up in advance of the session. If I'm understanding correctly, I think that's an admirable idea, and hopefully you can do that to some degree, but you can always, during that listening session, assuming you have, reasonable attendance, ask people for their feedback there, right? Like, where would you best find this? How could you most easily find this? Should there be a link on a social media bio or something like that? Would that be easy, right? And they can get that feedback and incorporate it. So, I think Cheryl's points are well taken. And if it has to go somewhere right now, so that at least there is some access before a listening session that still has yet to be scheduled, that doesn't have to be the only place that a link goes up. So once you get that direct feedback from community members, you might be able to figure out where it needs to go so that more people can see it.
I think that for the time being, we can certainly post the data that we have in the location that was referenced and offered And in the future, if we find a better, more accessible place, we can move it to that location. So this at least gets us started where we can put it out. So thank you.
All right, thanks. If there's no other comment or questions for this subcommittee, and I didn't see anybody from the community raise their hands, it'll be nice to move on to the diversion subcommittee with Stephanie.
Hello, everyone. And pardon having my camera off, but Zoom is not my friend today, so it's working better without the camera. And this is a short one. Hopefully I'll have a little bit of a longer report back at our next committee meeting, or our next full meeting. But we did nominate a new chair, which is me. Chief French and I just switched places. We also, we've been reviewing and working on, we have a working draft of our diversion recommendations. And we do have an attachment of that just so you can see what we've been working on. And so, like I said, it's a working draft of recommendations, and things may change given some of the information that we collect as we learn more about the different diversion programs in the county. So if you do have any questions around that, please, if you don't have any right now, please reach out. I don't know if folks can email me directly, but you can email Chris with any questions or concerns or things that you think may need to be added, and we can bring it up in the subcommittee. We've also been having presentations on the different diversion programs. We started off with youth diversion programs and had presentations from probation, the DA's office in Rise, and Richmond Police Department. At our next full meeting, I'll give more details on what those presentations were, because by that time we'll also have the adult presentations. We haven't had our adult presentations yet because of some scheduling conflicts, but by our next full meeting, we should have more information to share on what's in the county. And different ways to access those programs. As the other committees stated, we have also had connection with the folks on the JJCC since some of the work does intersect. And so it's really helpful to see what the different bodies are working on and how we can connect and coordinate with each other. And so my hope is that we continue to do that as we continue to transform our system. And that's all I have. So if there are any questions from the body.
I would just jump in to make a quick plug for members of the diversion subcommittee in particular. Remember that the agenda is going to need to be finalized by next Thursday, right? For the diversion subcommittee meeting, which will be the week after. Which means, right, if you need to reach out to your contacts who are supposed to be presenting about those adult diversion programs, or you need their materials to be submitted so that we can attach them to the agenda, you have about a week to get us those things. So please reach out to those individuals. Please get that information and get it to us as soon as possible. And yes, I will be sending an email out to remind you of that. Just wanted to put it on your radar because every month, turns around really fast. So we think we have a month to do something, and really, if you don't do it within about a week or two, you probably are, it's gonna come back to bite you. So for those of you who can or who have those contacts and need to get in touch with them to ensure that they can present and that we have their materials, please do so. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Any questions for the diversion subcommittee? Any public comment? Great. Move on to item number 5 on our agenda, discuss data request presentation at upcoming mayor's conference meeting. And we kind of talked about that a little bit, but is there an additional commentary or ask or discussion? And I'm not sure who's leading this part.
Yeah, I can quickly speak to this. And I believe you're right, Chief French. I think we pretty much covered what would have been discussed for this particular agenda item. I think we wanted to be sure that we had clarity on the specific data requests if the full body essentially endorses what the actual request will be made to the mayors at the mayor's conference. So if you look at page 26 of your packet, the specific ask request that the agencies provide their booking log or stop data on a quarterly basis, and that and then there's a listing of specific data points. So again, I think that's in line with Rebecca's presentation earlier about the contemporaneous data reporting that we're already asking for. So it's on the slide here. If for whatever reason there needs to be an adjustment or change, this is probably a good time to talk about it now, especially if for any of the full body members, you all have any questions or concerns. But otherwise, I feel we covered this.
Thank you, Patrice. So this is the part of the item that I hope to get some clarification on before we actually present. And so if I'm unable to get the clarification through the Chiefs, County Chiefs Association, then this will be the ask. Any other comments, questions? Public comment? All right. Item number 6, discuss joint community listening session with CEF subcommittee on data. Somebody leading this discussion? Chris, you look like you're jumping in to say something now.
I was just laughing because, you know, co-chair was like, help somebody, like speak to this. What do people have to say about it? I can set this up really quickly and just tell you that in a data subcommittee meeting a few months ago now, we were having a discussion that, you know, covered familiar territory, right? A lot of the things that we talk about here, not even so much about our action and what we can do, but we keep going to places requesting data and there are these obstacles. We are frustrated. What are we going to do here? And also along that line, when we get this data, shouldn't we share it with the community, right? Which came directly from Cheryl. I always, you know, like to give credit where credit is due. So Cheryl was like, we should not only secure the data that we're looking for, that we're asking for, but we should share it in a listening session. And of course, because the Community Engagement and Funding Subcommittee had conducted a listening session last year now, as quickly as that, you know, feels for me, it was last year. They conducted a listening session that was well attended, you know, wanting to coordinate with them to publicize and host this event, and, you know, for the data subcommittee to provide that data, trying to figure out what data should be presented. Also, hopefully, as you just heard, to get some feedback on where it should go so that the most people can have access to it. And so wanting to, because that's a data subcommittee and a community engagement funding subcommittee, which meet on different Thursdays, certainly if we could iron out any of the details here while both subcommittees are represented, you know, that would be ideal. I missed the last data subcommittee, and it seems like some questions were answered or some more details have been given since that time. So I would certainly, you know, turn to folks who were there to speak to those so that we can sort of move this forward. But that was the idea behind putting them on the agenda.
Yeah, I would just only add that because, you know, the two subcommittees, as you said, don't meet together. This is the time when we're together. So some of the detail that we had put in there is that the data that we hope to share is the same data that's in this packet, and that we plan to post on the website. And then the second, and that was approved by our subcommittee. We went through and that was approved by our group. And but wanted to bring it to the larger body to make sure that it met the needs that everyone had. And then the second part was the idea that Jeff and I, as the chairs of the respective subcommittees, would be the people to facilitate that listening session with Patrice and her staff there to help with the data interpretation. And so just wanting to run that structure by the larger body as well to see if that is okay.
All right, any other discussion? So there were a couple questions there. Open up the floor to see if there's any discussion on the questions that were asked by Rebecca. Are they the structure of the presentations with Rebecca and Jeff, with support from Patrice and the other staff at ORJ? Any discussion around that? I don't see any hands.
I want to point out that the data that we're talking about presenting for the listening session and on the Our Job website starts on page 28. As I mentioned, all of this data is publicly available data that comes from the state's Department of Justice. Some of these slides or these graphics have been presented before today. However, very recently, like within the last week, the DOJ released the 2020 data. So these slides now have 6 years worth of trends data from 2015 to 2020. They also cover both the adult population as well as the juvenile population for misdemeanor and felony arrests, as well as trends in the different types of offenses for both adults and juveniles. So the idea would be that there are 8 graphics, 4 for adults and 4 for juveniles that would be presented and discussed. So I just wanted to share that if there are any deep or questions. Also, I'd like to point out that the horizontal lines in each of the graphs reflect the Census Bureau estimated general population distribution in our county by race for either the broad adult population, or you'll see changes for the juvenile population. So they're both aligned there, so you can clearly see where the disparities exist.
And I just want to give a shout out to Denise for being ever so receptive to every idea that we came up with about different ways to make the data picture more clear. And just thank you so much for making it a truly iterative process. So.
All right, there was a second question that I now can't remember, Rebecca, that you posed.
I think it was just the structure of how it would be facilitated and the content that Denise just detailed. If there's a third question, I've forgotten it too.
Okay. Cheryl has her hand up. Go ahead, Cheryl.
So we're gonna go back to talking about the community and who the audience is for this data. And there's something that Jeff always says. So Jeff, I'm gonna steal your words. And so I think it's very important that we pay attention to who the audience is for this data. We pay attention to who the impacted people are who may show up at these public listening sessions, right? And we do a little introspection. And I love that you do this, Jeff. So excuse me if I embarrass you a little bit. When we are in our racial justice coalition meetings, Jeff is really good at recognizing his privilege and his look and taking a step back. So Rebecca and Jeff, I'm gonna say this to you, and I want you to know the place in which I say this. As two people who are not representative of the communities that are most impacted by this criminal legal system, I want you to take a look and think again about whether you are the best people to deliver this data to the communities that are most impacted by this criminal legal system. And you should think about how it will be perceived and accepted by people who already don't trust the government and don't trust the criminal legal system. It doesn't matter how good the data is. People don't trust the veracity of the information if they don't trust the people who deliver it. And if you represent a system that is not trustworthy, they won't listen to you. It doesn't matter. So I would say rethink who should be facilitating these conversations, especially when it comes to data. Because as a scientist, I will tell you that I've said this on more than one occasion. I just had to do this last week when we were having a conversation about segregation, desegregation, reparations. And this white guy comes in telling us, well, my data shows that we shouldn't have, this separate by equal and all this discussion. And I say to you, the data can be manipulated based on who sponsors the research and who is behind the data. Now, this is very good data, and Ms. Denise, you've done an awesome job with it. But if people are already suspicious and they already have been harmed so much that hurt is still so alive in them, and they already come in suspicious, it is very hard to get past that. So you have to give them trusted messengers, and you have to give them people that they're willing to listen to in order to get past that, so that they actually listen to the contents and that the people and personalities don't block the ability to have a conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Jeff, you have your hand up.
Thanks, and thank you, Cheryl. Many things I love about Cheryl, and one of them is being willing to say the uncomfortable. I mean, I was thinking this, and no surprise that it does make sense for us to be considering how we're presenting the information. So I just want to say it's well received, and thank you, Cheryl.
And I would like to just say, I also acknowledge what you're saying, Cheryl, and I don't have any attachment to being the person who presents it. It was just, I think, in a more structural thing that as the chairs of the subcommittees that, it was more about our role. And I would just say that that's also part of why I wanted to bring that idea to the greater body in case somebody else wanted to volunteer. Happy to pass it to somebody else who would be better received.
Are there any other volunteers that would like to present?
Understood. I think that we have a while before we schedule it. And I think that we have people on the committees, Ms. Bisa. And I think that we should start there first before we come back to this greater body to do that, right? So maybe we can start there.
Sounds good to me. Tamisha.
I want to also raise up, so we're saying community listening sessions, is that correct?
Yes.
So as a body that was advocated for and is by community members from the Racial Justice Coalition, if it's really a, joint community led process, would it make sense for us to also consider the community as full partners in this work and seek out some community members, maybe folks from the Racial Justice Coalition, to co-present that would give the diversity necessary in this process, but also will continue our, inclusive nature. Like this was, we're here because of the community. So I think we should consider that.
I see a few thumbs up. And so I think that there's enough people on here to go back to their committees to discuss with their committees to come up with some recommendations. I don't see any more hands. Is there public comment for this particular item? Seeing none. Move on to number 7, discuss structural changes to increase subcommittee productivity.
Yeah, I can speak to that. And first of all, let me just say, as a person who has a role in drafting these agendas, I apologize. I didn't mean to put this at number 7 because there was an agenda item that arose from public comment that I would have liked to put ahead of this, and then I could have taken this on at the end. I certainly am not opposed to skipping and coming back to this after we raise that issue. I think it, may have some significant discussion if that's all the same. Point of order, if that's something that we can do. I think we've done it before.
Any objection to switching the order to discuss number 8 prior to number 7? Is that what you're asking, Chris? Okay. Seeing no objection, let's talk about the discuss law enforcement vetting concerns raised in CEF subcommittee public comment. Is there somebody that's heading that discussion? Because I have no idea what it's about.
I could follow up just from subcommittee to say, following up on what I had initially indicated in our subcommittee report, that Mr. Crawford Carpenter had come to our subcommittee and raised this, I think initially having brought it to a different body in the county and was told perhaps not the right place and to come to us. So we were aware that there had already been kind of indication that you need to go to the appropriate place, and we received it knowing that there's only so much we can take on at any given time. And also this seems within the scope of the sorts of things that we would be concerned about and wanting to follow up. And it's part of our work as community engagement to be receiving things and not just staying on our, this is the work plan we had before, but seriously engaging with what we receive. So right, I think to move it forward is to see if perhaps there are willing partners. I mean, beyond saying, well, who can we force to get information, or how do we try to push to have this, is there the ability, willingness within our own group to say, well, at least this is how we do this. And I think really what having in mind is there some sort of process that's in place for example, probation or Richmond Police Department or Sheriff's Office to be either at the front end or sometime periodically to be checking on this question of, well, it would be of concern if there were law enforcement officer who's actively engaged in some sort of white supremacy or hate group. And how would we know that? Is there something in place that's already kind of meeting the realities of people's privacy, which is always something, and no matter what organization you're in, you have to be aware of, and certainly with employees. And then also, this is relevant to, at least I think it was our discussion in the subcommittee, this is relevant to safety and community trust and a whole host of other factors. So I don't know if there's anyone who feels prepared to, able to say, well, at least on our end, this is how we do or would handle that.
Excuse me, Jeff, this is Crawford Carpenter. May I make a statement prior to the board as a whole discussing this, if that would not be out of order?
I don't object to it. I mean, you brought the matter to us and can probably give more context about how you did bring it to us.
Well, thank you then. Well, first of all, to the committee or the board as a whole, good afternoon. And especially to you, Jeff, thank you for your guidance and moving this forward. Again, thank you. I am a member of CAB, though I'm speaking now as a private citizen. Previously, I reached out to your community engagement and funding subcommittee regarding the question of vetting those who are tasked with protecting us. For example, the sheriff's office, the DA's office, the public defender's office, the probation's office, etc., to determine if some of their members are possibly, underline possibly, involved in fringe organizations. For example, Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, Boogaloos, White Nationalists, QAnon, neo-Nazis, etc. There may be more. Or could have some other red flag issues in their backgrounds that deserve clarification, such as domestic abuse. I'm now reaching out to this body with the hope of moving this forward rather than having it basically pushed back to a committee, and 9 months from now, we're still talking about it. And I make that point after listening to Ms. Bates. Let me be clear. We need law enforcement, but it must be administered in a fair and just manner. In certain communities, a community that I belong to, there is a crisis of confidence in law enforcement. Vetting might be a mini step in restoring that confidence. Finally, it's most important to note that I personally believe that the vast majority of those involved in the criminal justice system and charged with protecting us are dedicated, well-intentioned public service. Let me repeat that. I believe that the vast majority of those involved in the criminal justice system and charged with protecting us are dedicated, well-intentioned servants. However, I remember a saying by Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. I am asking that we verify by vetting. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. I can tell you from my perspective, and I can probably speak for the other chiefs in the county, that we go through a very detailed vetting process for our police officers. And in part of that vetting, they are asked about any affiliations with any types of gangs or groups, like you've mentioned. And not only do we ask about it, they're questioned, they go through a polygraph that also confirms this information, and a background investigation in which friends and family and people that are not even listed are contacted to verify who they are and their affiliations. So we do go through a very thorough vetting process. And then if somehow that is missed and we identify that while they're working, there are certain policies that are in place that prohibit being a part of any of those types of groups that will call for termination of that employee. I don't know if anybody from the other groups want to chime in.
I'm happy to. This is Issa from probation. Very similar. We have a very extensive background process. And then in addition to that, there's always the opportunity to file any sort of citizen's complaint should a member of the general public come across something that we wouldn't be aware of. So there's an additional way that if things get brought to our attention, if we somehow miss something in that initial vetting process, that gives us the opportunity to go back and address it at that point in time.
Cheryl, I see your hand up. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much. And so I was at this meeting, so thank you, Sir Carpenter and Jeff. And so I was at this meeting, and so one of the things, in addition to what Mr. Carpenter was speaking of, in addition to these groups, a lot of the concern is not just that, is the behavioral concern, because we've heard of many cases in where, yes, You go through the background check and you do the vetting. And then you have these officers who still go off the rails, who have been charged with, who have social media posts. We just saw some right here in Oakland with social media posts with hate messages posted right in the open and showing you who they are. The old saying, Maya Angelou, when someone shows you who they are, you believe them the first time. This is not a new thing. And so people lie. They lie to get the job that they want. So it's not just, are you a member of these groups? Are you displaying the behavior that shows that you are not eligible for this type of job that is supposed to protect and serve all of the people, not just the ones that you pick out that you want to protect and serve. If you show a propensity for hate, discrimination, bias, then you do not deserve to be in these type of field. If you show a propensity for domestic violence, for child abuse, for if you have a history of sexual assault yourself, what is the likelihood that you are going to be one who can deal with that, with sexual assault and rape is part of your job. So it's not just these organizations that is the issue. The vetting has to take place in other things. If you have a history of extreme rage and violence, that also has to be part of the process, because your own mental state, your own inability to control your rage, your violence has a direct correlation to your ability to deal with instances of crowd control, your instances of dealing with people whom may have mental illness or who may be in a uncontrollable state, whether or not it is dealing with mental illness. So all of that is part of vetting individuals who we are handing weapons and who are out killing people at random. Well, I thought he was going to kill me. So you have no control. People who are, and I think it's a very fine line that we walk, because we don't want to judge people who may have had some past issues, but at the same time, if I'm going to give you a gun and a license to kill people, I need to know that you can handle that responsibility. Plain and simple. I'm not, if we can judge people and they can play judge and jury and gunning down Black and brown and indigenous people and people in poverty, then I need to know that they can handle that responsibility. And if they cannot, then they don't deserve to have that control. And this is not just officers, police officers, this is parole officers. And the example that I gave was that parole officer who put that 70-some-odd-year woman in jail because she missed a class, because she missed a call, because she was in a class. There has to be some type of common sense training, insight, something other than this blanket hatred of people of a certain, whether it's class or race or gender or whatever, that we have to be vetting better. Because Chief French, you may have a great vetting procedure for your departments. Ms. Issa, you may have a very great vetting for your department, but we have to admit that not everyone is doing it. It's not there, or we would not keep having these instances. We would not have it. So we have to do better, and we have to look at the ones who are lost. Because one life lost because we're refusing to clamp down and value everybody's life is wrong. That was the conversation that we had. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Jeff?
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up to say, and I'm taking my hand down, that I want to recognize and appreciate leadership by ISA and Richmond Police and ISA and the Probation Department, and volunteering the information and leading that off, which I think is essential to learn from others, because then there's the leadership and example that there's this sharing of information. So I know that there's only so much we can do at this moment, and it's impossible to speak for other departments. Perhaps if we have the interest in this group and capacity, that this could be a returning agenda item at next quarterly, that we could seek to have updates or information from other agencies that are not here, trying to capture what sort of practices are in place as a whole. And if there are agencies, again, this is not mandating, or at least I'm not seeing it as a mandate as much as it's something we would be taking on and attempting to learn and share, as much as not directing the departments to do, but hopefully with leadership from the agencies here might be willing to share what they have in place, and it could lead those agencies that don't have something as robust to take appropriate measures to learn that there is more that could be done to try to prevent having someone in a position of power that ought not be there. So I'm specifically proposing to have a returning agenda item at our next quarterly to have an update on this and see if we can gather more information as to those agencies not present.
Jeff, this is Crawford. Thank you very much for that. I think that would be a positive step forward, and particularly for the agencies that have not been present. For those that are here, Essa, Rebecca, and Chief French, thank you. It's nice to see, encouraging that you're doing the right thing. But the old story, yes, you three are, but we may have some that aren't. And again, thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you. All right, so I don't know if we're coming back to number 7 then.
Yep, we can. I don't know if you had already asked for any public comment on.
I'm sorry, I did not. Is there any more public comment on number 8, which was the discussion around law enforcement vetting concerns? Do not see any hands being raised.
All right. So I put this on the agenda and could not have predicted that folks would get, well, maybe I could have predicted somewhat that folks would have gotten into essentially what this was meant to get at, right? So I'm noticing as I'm continuing to work with this group, some totally normal and natural signs of a little bit of burnout or a little bit of frustration. Those things, again, are natural. This is not the only group that's going to deal with that, right? I would be out of my mind to try to replicate the passionate responses that you got from Tamisha and Cheryl, right, about why this work is important. And even though it is frustrating and it goes so much more slowly than we would like, why we have to stay the course, even though it does not happen overnight. But I'm just going to take a moment here to say to all of you, right, that as you're doing this work and as you're remembering, right, that the work of this group is not just what happens in these meetings, right? Not just showing up to the meetings and being heard on the record, but also the nuts and bolts and legwork that happen in between, right? So making good on the commitments that we make in these meetings, right? In the weeks in between, so that when we come back, we have something new to report, so that there is continuation and momentum and consistency. I just want to remind you all to take a step or a breath, that is, and to think about, why it is that you're here, because you're all here for real reasons that carry over into various other places that you show up and do very similar work. And burnout, again, while it is natural and normal, we can't afford to lose your fervor. We can't afford to lose your effort. We can't afford to lose your ingenuity, your creativity, your willingness to show up to these meetings as best you can, as diligently as possible. We need you, and we absolutely can make things better, right, for children and adults of color and everyone else in this county if we're willing to do that work and we're willing to do it consistently. It's never going to go again as fast as we want, but that doesn't mean that meaningful things haven't happened, as was pointed out earlier in the meeting, and certainly that they can happen for you, right? I'll harken back to, I think maybe the last end of year report that I did, and I presented it, and Robin came to one of these and she said, Chris made us sound so good, right? And I said, hey, I didn't lie. Like, it doesn't seem like it's going as fast as you want, but, we're on the right track. And now I'm going to say, while I believe in everyone here and the work that you all do in so many spaces, in addition to this one, I do think we can be a little bit more productive. I do think we can be a little bit more effective. I do think we can be a little bit more efficient than maybe we've been in the last quarter. And I think there are some things that we can implement that can help us to do that. In addition to just remembering why it is that we're here and holding on to that urgency and that effort and that belief that we actually can make a difference, because we can. So there are 3 things that I would suggest. I don't think these things have to be formal. They don't require a vote. Certainly if someone wants to make a motion or feels like a motion is necessary, they may feel free. But these are things that I would, in particular, suggest that we can do that might help to keep that continuity and to make sure that the legwork, that those meetings that are supposed to be happening sometimes in between meetings, right, about certain projects like the community capacity fund or the youth advisory council, like these sorts of things, to make sure that we're actually making good on those and making progress toward them. And so I'll just lay those out really quickly. The first is a return to form, so to speak, as far as follow-up meetings, right? Particularly after subcommittee meetings. This was something that we used to do. I stopped doing it because at the beginning of this year, ORJ, we had Denise and Nicole holding it down, right? And I was trying not to have them or you guys who are in so many tables doing so many things all the time, and we all have Zoom fatigue. It was like, if I don't want to make meetings out of emails, if I can send emails and get some things done, I won't pull people into meetings. Over the last couple of quarters, that's maybe been a little bit less effective. I think having some level of accountability, which we had, right, when we would have these meetings, and folks knew, okay, maybe in about a week or 2, I'm going to need to, in a prep meeting, say, yes, I followed up on that, and this is what I have, or this is what, the next step will be. Just that level of accountability really was helping us, I think, to move things forward. And I think it's something that we need to return to. So again, that's not something we have to vote on. It's for folks who were not chairs or, whatever else, you may not even have been aware that they were happening, because there are, requirements per the Brown Act. So it's not like we're trying to have a quorum in these meetings and then they have to go on the agenda and become public and this whole thing. We just want to have, some representation to figure out what work has been done, what, next steps need to be taken, so that at the next meeting, we're moving things forward. So that would be step number 1. The next thing that I would suggest is not quite a return to form for everyone, but somewhat a return to form, at least for one of the subcommittees. And that is that each chair at least has a designee that for each subcommittee that they work alongside. I've seen that work with the data subcommittee quite well. In its previous iteration, in its previous administration, there was Deborah and the gentleman's name escapes me, who represented, who was the court representative last term.
Jim.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. So he just volunteered to step into that role. And so what that meant was, in these prep meetings, even in actual meetings, wherever there were side projects or things that needed to be done, there were two people as opposed to the same one person that were able to work toward those things, so that it's not all falling on the chair. And if the chair can't show up or can't be there, nothing gets done. Nobody knows sort of what to do. And so I think just dividing that labor a little bit so that it does not all fall on one chairperson would be really, really helpful in keeping this going. And also to go back to Community Capacity Fund and Youth Advisory Council, right? Those are some pretty good examples of what I'm talking about. Those fall on CEF. And I'm not saying any of that to call Jeff out. I see Jeff made sure to get back on screen. It's like, oh, it's holding me accountable. I'm not. What I'm saying is those are two things that you, as the chair, right, of that subcommittee would have to also do, in addition to, chairing these meetings and maybe, hosting or not hosting, finding someone else to host, say, a listening session, right? So if you had another person to help shoulder the burden that could take some of these things so that, you both could be more effective than one person, that's just an example of why I think it would be really helpful. Because again, the work is happening in between the meetings. It's not about just showing up to meetings and being heard, but also like the legwork that has to be done. And we probably need more hands on deck to carry that. And in addition to that, the last thing that I would say is we really need all hands on deck with that part too, right? And so what I would encourage folks to do, and I'm happy to have individual conversations with folks, about this if necessary. I would really like to see folks, thinking about what their role on each subcommittee is, what role they want to play in particular in moving some of the agenda items along, or helping to get us where we're trying to go with respect to specific items that are sort of long-term undertakings, as well as other things that may be on the work plan. And then really, volunteering when, it's time to do something on that, to make sure that you're stepping up in some meaningful way, so that even though, again, we couldn't accommodate having everybody in a planning meeting, and that is not the goal. The goal would be for folks to be able to reach out to a chair or designee, even if you're not one of those people, to say, hey, we are trying to move this particular agenda item forward. I have a contribution to make. Here it is, right? That I think would be a lot more helpful if we're all chipping in to do that. That allows us all, A, to feel like we actually have a role to play in this work, and B, for you to actually see that progress at the level and at the extent that you all want, and that we all need, right, in order to feel like we're getting the best bang for our buck. So those are just suggestions from me. Again, I don't think any of those things really need to be formalized, as much as, there are things that we can take up in each subcommittee from here. And in terms of setting up meetings, we can reach out via email to try to schedule that. But I think if we implement those things and we remember and keep top of mind as best we can while we're here, and realize that it's okay and it's normal to get frustrated and feel a little burnt out, and that's why having everyone help out is going to be instrumental with that, we can have, I think, the best, most productive quarter we've had this quarter. And I would really like to see you all do that. I believe that we can do that. I definitely believe, as I've always said, that we have the right people here, right? Based on the conversation, based on the level of thoughtfulness that you all display on a regular basis to really move this forward. It's just about making those structural adjustments and tweaks, and remembering, again, right, the spirit of what it is that we're here to do and what drives us to keep doing it, that I think helps us to get there. So I'll leave it there, but I believe in this group's ability to execute, and I'm looking forward to showing up at the next quarterly meeting and patting everyone on the back for, the improvements that I know are going to be made from here to there. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I think we all owe it to ourselves and Chris in this work to step up. So I appreciate that. Any other comments for Chris around his comments? Any public comment? Jeff.
Just my appreciation, Chris. I mean, you're encouraging us, and I know that also everyone here has the passion to do this, and I think it's uncomfortable sometimes to be saying what's there and recognizing that we may need to light a fire again in some way. So, and also to have some structural changes to assist in really making sure that we're doing everything we can. So appreciate that, and I'm in favor of the recommendations.
Did he disappear? Oh, no, it's finished. Okay, Tamisha.
Thank you for those words and suggestions, recommendations. I also want to just raise up recruit. Some of us might be ready to step down sooner than folks thought. People's lives are different now since the panorama, and there's a lot that has been going on for folks. And so there might need to be a conversation around recruitment, early recruitment. When are people set to kind of descend, and how do we, get, fresh, newly committed folks with the same vigor, passion, and time to continue to move this work forward.
Thank you, Tamisha. Anyone else? All right, like Chris said, there wasn't actually any voting, or was it action item, even though it wasn't an action item, but we all hear you. I think the last thing now, if we don't have anything else, is to adjourn to our next meeting, which is November 4th from 1 to 4.
Thank you, co-chairs.
Thank you all.